Hey there, it's Ryan Smetzer, and you are listening to the On the Mic podcast.
Welcome to the first episode of season 2 of On the Mic podcast. I am your host, Jacob, and this is your co-host, Jordan. Yeah. Jordan is the co-host of season 2, so we're going to be collabing and working together for season 2 of On the Mic podcast. So here's Jordan to do like his little intro, like saying who he is and all that. So yeah.
Well, it's good to be here with you, Jacob. I'm very excited to be your co-host for season 2 for On the Mic podcast. If you don't know me, I do stutter a lot sometimes. That will come here and there. Normally, I don't come on the radio, but it's coming here. I'm not nervous or anything. But if you guys not know who I am, I'm Jordan Adler, J-Man. I've run an internet radio station called J-Man Radio in Mesa, Arizona. So I have my own podcast, which is called The Talkcast, and I'm here to help Jacob and here to be here with all of you. I'm very excited to be here.
Yay, I like that.
And we are talking to Ryan today.
Mm-hmm. Okay, now here's Ryan to introduce who he is and all that. So yeah.
Yeah, what's going on, guys? First of all, obviously, to you guys have done an awesome job with this. Season 1 was fantastic. Just getting to get to meet so many awesome people over the course of those episodes there. So congrats to you two on just all of your work and kind of just building up the community of broadcasters, of content creators, and just kind of, keeping that positivity going. But my name is Ryan Smetzer. I work in radio for a company called Alpha Media. We have a whole slew of radio stations all over the nation. But the ones that I actually work for are in Hagerstown, Maryland, and Chambersburg, Pennsylvania. So like South Central PA and kind of Western Maryland in that neck of the woods. I do on-air work for them along with social and web design, all those different things, which of course you kind of have to be that like Swiss Army knife with some of those roles in radio nowadays. I also took over for our news division for about 1.5 years during COVID, which was a whole adventure in itself. And then of course on the side, I do some work as a wedding DJ in this whole community up and down I-81 here in Maryland and PA. And I do some on-camera work whenever I get the opportunity for a couple of digital media companies here in the area, and then some other things through my agency. And it's an awesome time just to be able to kind of do a mixed bag of different types of content. And then obviously more recently I've been able to have the cool opportunity to work with the awesome people there at Free for All and be on the panel there for the last couple of weeks. So I'm kind of like the fresh rookie of that show, but it's been a fun time nonetheless.
It's good. I like that.
And you have a pretty dope studio too.
Thanks, man. Yeah, this is all like
studio.
Yeah. Thanks. This is all fairly recent. So this whole room that I'm in right now is my old storage closet space for all of my DJ equipment. And then whenever the pandemic lockdowns began and we were all kind of, pushed to, hey, do all your on-air work from home, I basically took all of this room, gutted it out, and turned it into what it is at this point. But within the last couple of months, I've been able to put up a little bit more of the soundproofing and the paneling and the lights and all that good stuff. And now it's a little wild, and it's kind of funny because like this looks epic, and then everything over here is all just like all my like Funko Pop bobbleheads, and it looks it looks more so of like a college kid's dorm room on the other side than like everything back here, which is the actual Ryan as a 26-year-old kind of vibe in the room. So
that's awesome. I like that.
That's cool.
Talking about like your studio full of it. So how long did it like take you to put like this whole thing together?
Yeah. So as far as the studio space, ironically enough, about 2 months before COVID was even a conversation piece, I had bought a Rodecaster Pro, mixing board and a podcast microphone and all of these different pieces with kind of the anticipation of, getting into podcasting. That was my original idea was, hey, I'm going to, go in and start creating some podcasts, do some voiceover work on the side. And then COVID happened, and I was like, all right, well, this is actually also going to be used for me to actually do my day-to-day work as an on-air personality. So it turned into that over time. And, now slowly but surely has been also working to, become more of a live stream studio and voiceover work on the side and all of those different things that I had planned on doing in early 2020, on top of then, of course, what I've been, doing here, on the air with some of the radio stations here in the area. So it's been nice because, again, it offers that flexibility because not only do I have this here, but I can take pieces of this and throw it in a bag and really travel and actually do my work at the same time. Like my dad coaches a baseball team and he's doing a tournament in Florida in 2 weeks. And I told him, I was like, I'm going to get my stuff and I'm flying down to Florida with you. And so it offers that flexibility, a ton. And it's super fun too, because I can change this up however I want to and, do whatever content that I want to do, whether it's like this kind of vibe or if I wanted to have, all the bobbleheads and stuff in the background. So
that's good. And then, so is it on the question too, but I want to ask this. How is it like helping like the station? Like you said, like you like help like the stations a little bit, like when you're not like talking on the radio, like you help them, like how is that?
Yeah, so the one thing that I had kind of been tasked with back whenever I had kind of shifted into full time at the radio stations about 1.5 to 2 years ago was kind of digging into our alternate content. We were kind of one of those clusters of radio stations that was kind of in the groove of just being on air, doing our shows on the radio, doing our contests over the phone, doing all these kinds of things, just like, we had been for 30 to 40 years. And we, kind of were in that shift where I kind of went to everybody and I was like, hey, we've got to kind of get on the train of how radio as an industry is evolving, or we're going to be in a lot of trouble. And so, what I have kind of, aided with, with our brands more so in the last couple of years has been, working on better web content, working on more original content, video. That was one thing that was just like, we had not really touched with a 10-foot pole.
Virtual stuff.
Yeah. And so for me, I was like, we got to get into the stuff that like is the chewable content that people can get outside of just listening in their cars. Because, 9 times out of 10, if people are at home or if they aren't going out and about, they're probably, not tuning in 100% terrestrially in their cars or, 9 times out of 10 too, not a ton of people have boom boxes in their houses anymore. And so, that, and I actually had to go out and buy one whenever COVID happened so I can monitor the station I was on. Yeah. Cause I had thrown a lot of mine away over the years. Cause again, you've got an Amazon Echo, you got a Google Play, you've got your phone. And so, a lot of the content is just like
iHeartRadio.
Exactly. Like you've got that chewable content that you can guide people to, to stream the station. I can do stuff that then tells people at the end also, hey, don't forget, you can listen to me on Odyssey, on TuneIn, on iHeart. We've got like, the one thing that's cool about Alpha is we've got all of our stations are on like all of the platforms. So like you can get us on Odyssey, on iHeart, on TuneIn, on Alexa, Google Play, on your, obviously on the websites. So it's created that opportunity that, hey, if we have our stations on all of these different platforms, we've got to also be providing content on social media, or else people aren't really even going to know like, oh, hey, Live 96.7, Ryan did a video on Instagram. You know what? I'm going to listen to that station, but I also don't have my car. So I'm going to go and pull it up online. You got to give people a reason to want to like listen, to want to engage and want to consume your content. And, so that was where I really kind of helped not only myself personally, guiding into that next generation, but helping to guide kind of some of, our teammates and really just, some of the industry in this area and being like, hey, let's all kind of step into this together. And that was just something out of college that I was like, hey, let's dive more into the future of where this, industry is evolving. And some people get freaked out about that. Some people see that and they're like, okay, the industry's diving away from listening on your radio. Like what's going to happen next? Are we going to, we're doomed. And I'm like, no, we're not doomed. We just, kind of have to like, nurture nurture the industry, nurture the medium a little bit more and, do some more stuff on this thing, on this thing, on, on the internet, because at the end of the day, like we've got a new generation of kids that are growing up not really knowing how to tune to a station.
Yeah.
You know, I've had friends of
Mhm.
mine that will talk about how, like, you know, they'll walk up to a radio, like a boombox radio, and ask
Hmm.
it to play a station or ask it to play an
Wow.
artist. And it's like, well, actually, you've got to turn a wheel, or
Mhm.
press a button to go to
Yeah.
a, you know, go to a number and you know, pull
Mhm.
up a
Yeah.
frequency and all those different things. And kids are like, what? No, I'm gonna go over and ask, you know, my Echo to go over and play that, you know, song that I want to hear. So, you know,
Mhm.
it's all about just kind of like, hey, inspiring the next generation to
Yeah.
listen to our content, but also to just continue to adapt and
Mhm.
evolve into, you know, what we're you know, moving into, which is a very
Yeah.
digital age, obviously, that we're already in the
Mhm.
thick of. So that's kind of where I'm at with a lot of that stuff that I've, you know, kind of helped out with the station for, with just kind
Hmm.
of, you know, managing that digital content and the social, you
Mhm.
know, our social footprints and all of those different pieces.
That's good. Like that. And yeah, it's like important, like when you're in radio, like in this industry, it's like as you said, like it's important like to do stuff and post content and all that.
Oh yeah.
And like what Marie, like AKA the radio fan,
Oh,
like
she's awesome.
she's even like, yeah, she is. She's like even like
She's great.
saying like this, like it's important to like do content, post that stuff and
Mhm.
all that. And yeah.
Yeah.
So
Because or else they just think that you're just like a robotic voice that's talking
Mhm.
over your car.
Mhm.
And you know, we always push the idea of being, you know, live and local with a lot of our brands. And, you know, and
Mhm.
I finally was just kind of like in that spot where I'm like, okay, cool. We sound live and local on our stations, which is fantastic. Because, you
Mhm.
know, there's a lot of, you know, companies out there that, you know, aren't, you know, diving into that neck of the woods, but to be
Mhm.
able to, you know, be live and local and sound live and local over the radio is
Yeah.
great. But in order to kind of further accentuate that and to connect with the audience, you got to show them
Mhm.
your face. You got to talk to them on Instagram. You got to jump
Mhm.
on TikTok and make some videos that they're going to be, you know,
Mhm.
entertained by. You got to podcast. You got to do
Yeah.
all of those different things, you know, so that they're like, okay, yeah, I listened to 96.7 or I listened to
Mhm.
95.1, and you know, there's that Ryan guy that's on there, and you know,
Mhm.
I saw him at the grocery store, and you know, all that kind of stuff. It's not about like a celebrity status or a fame
Mhm.
thing at all. It's more so about like, hey, how can
It
we
could
show
be.
the it could be, but at the end of the day, it's also just like it's one of those things that it's, you know, it to me, I always see it as like, how can I connect with my community in a
Mhm.
way that I can, you know, help them, I can brighten their day, or just
Mhm.
in general, I can provide them with, you know, information in a fun way that they're going to be interested in consuming. And in order to do
Yeah.
that, I've just got to reveal that, like, hey, this is me, this is my
Mhm.
personality, you know, you're all my friends, that kind of
Mhm.
concept. So
Yeah.
less about the whole like, oh, I've got this amount of followers or our ratings or
Mhm.
X, Y, and Z. It's more so just like, hey, if you know, if we know that like, you know, people are connecting with our product in a good way, to
Mhm.
me that's like, you know, I could care less about like a book coming out and being like, oh, hey,
Mhm.
look at our, you know, look at our shares versus this one's shares and all
Yeah.
that kind of stuff. Like, you know, it's less about the, hey, let's look at everything
Mhm.
competitively, and more of just like, hey, let's just keep doing what we're doing and keep trying to improve it.
Yeah. That's good. I like that. And
It's
like what
always nice
call
where you. It's always nice when you can beat your like your competition.
Yeah,
Mhm.
exactly. I mean,
You know,
it's, you know, it's one of those
do
things. Yeah,
stuff before them.
right. Being competitive is, you know, is fantastic, but it's like at the end of
Mhm.
the day, like if you start putting your eggs too much in the I want to, you know, I want to beat this product or beat this brand or, you know, beat
Mhm.
this cluster or any of that kind of stuff, it just
Mhm.
turns into like ultimately it shows in, you know,
Mhm.
whenever you're presenting on the air or when you're making
Yeah.
videos and all that kind of stuff, it starts to show that like you're just doing it to like take down the station, you know, down the street.
Mhm.
And so that's, you know, what I've always tried to do the thing that a lot of, you know, people in the industry, especially in the last several generations, aren't a fan of, which is
Mhm.
connecting and networking with my competitors.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah,
they're not
yeah.
like there were the days where obviously like you would have like the, you know, what are like the street wars where you had all the
Mhm.
stations along at a remote at the same exact time. And, you know,
Yeah.
you'd be like ultimately like figuratively spitting in each other's faces. But for me, I'm
Mhm.
like, you know what? Like ultimately we're all people who grew up in the industry, that are inspired by the
Mhm.
industry, that love what we get to do. And, you know,
Yeah.
why not be friends? Why,
Mhm.
you know, that's
Yeah,
for
let's just
me.
work together.
Right. I'm
Mhm.
ultimately in that spot where I'm like, look, I love to connect with those people because, you know, ultimately they may not be there forever. And if they
Mhm.
move on to another area or they move on to higher spaces and stuff like that, you
Mhm.
know, at the end of the day, they're going to be able to help you. You're going to be able to help them. You know, I hate to, you coin the phrase from High School Musical, but we're all in this together ultimately.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's kind of where I stand on that whole thing.
That's good. Like, and like what Carl, Marie, and Anthony are doing, like they started like this new podcast, the Morning Show podcast. If you guys haven't checked it out, it's awesome. Check it out. And yeah, and they're like telling like people that they're important and that they matter and all that, and they just want to like make a difference and all that. So it's awesome what they're doing and all that. And yeah.
Yeah, they're amazing. You know, what they've been able to do to, really ultimately evolve, what they were already doing, between, everything that they were doing in New York, everything that they've, been doing in Seattle, and then, even shifting gears out of radio and being able to just revolutionize the product of doing a Twitch show. And now, like you said, like ultimately doing a podcast that is, again, that nice chewable 10 to 15, 20-minute content that, people are on their daily commute and they get to hear encouraging words and things that they want to know about, that are in the news or in pop culture. Like that's exactly what people want to hear. And that's exactly what people need to be consuming right now. We're in scary times, we're in weird times. And, that's one thing that, you don't want to beat the drum of that constantly, but like, the best way to combat that we can ultimately do, in our whatever platforms that we have is radiate some sort of positivity. And I think that's what they do so well.
Yeah, like that. You do like a really good job of doing that and all that. So yeah,
thanks.
If you guys are listening, good job with what you guys are doing. So yeah. Okay, now let's jump into the questions now. Yeah. Okay, so the first question is, how did you get started in this industry?
So I would say I would go all the way back to like when I was like 8 or 9 years old. I told my parents that I wanted to be the next Ryan Seacrest, which I feel like is
that's my corniest. Dream too.
Yeah, yes. I was gonna say I felt to me when I was younger as like a really corny thing, and then it has now kind of evolved into like, that's still my goal. Like that's still my, it's still what I want to do. And so, like jokingly when I was like 9 or 10 years old, I had like borrowed my mom's old tape recorder and I'd like record over, American Top 40 with Ryan Seacrest, and I'd dub in, like my voice over his, or like Hot 99.5 in DC. I'd like dub over like, the Kane Show or Toby Knapp or any of those guys. And I would just be like, this is what I want to do. Like, this is super cool. And I'd have fun with it. I like, brought a bunch of my friends over to like the tree at the playground whenever we were in recess. And I'd be like, hey, let's do our own version of American Idol. And I'd have them sing, and I'd like, and now, okay, here's the results, and you've been eliminated, or you're going home, and like all that stuff. And it was weird. Again, like I got picked on for it, but now I'm like, I'm glad I did it. And then, that of course evolved into, middle school doing morning announcements crew. We had like a tiny little TV station in there where we did all of our morning announcements. And, high school, I went to high school for theater, which that helped significantly with learning like public speaking skills, speech, enunciation, all of those diction, all those things. And, I had the option out of high school. Do I want to go to college for musical theater, or do I want to go to college for communications, which is what I wanted to do when I was 8 years old in the playground. So I chose that one instead. I've still, do some performing and stuff. I've dug really, hardcore into the broadcast, landscape, whether it be when I was in community college, calling baseball games for my, community college, and then spending my last 2 years at Shippensburg University out here in South Central PA. And during that time was actually whenever I had picked up a job part-time where I'm at now at Alpha Media, and did Saturday mornings from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. on Mix 95.1, and any fill-in work whenever like our afternoon personalities would go on vacation, all of those different kinds of things. And slowly then in my senior year of college was whenever that evolved into me being on every night from 6 to 10 on Mix. And, a couple of years after college, I was sitting in a spot where I'm like, okay, I need to take on a full-time position. That's, what I need to get those health benefits, because I'm, it was coming up on time where that was going to be pulled away from, you get your benefits with your parents until like 25. So I took on a full-time sales job in the radio stations, and, was selling for all of our stations, which honestly, like I would recommend to like anybody who's in the industry that's like growing in the industry to spend at least a year or two in sales, because it really does help you get an understanding of the full scope of the business of radio. And it really does humble you too at the same time. So I spent about 2 years full time in sales, up until about Thanksgiving of 2020. I was able to sit down with my general manager, who is a freaking angel. Like, he's amazing. You know, in a world where you hear a lot of horror stories about GMs, he is incredible. So him and I sat down and I was like, look, I just, you know, I'm losing the excitement for this whole sales thing. I don't think you know, it wasn't that I didn't feel like I was cut out to be a salesperson, but at this, you know, because I have tremendous respect for that side of the industry, but I was just in that spot where it was just so hard for me, especially during the pandemic, to go to people and be like, hey, I know you're struggling. Can I have $1,500? Like, it was just so hardy to be like, hey, here's the schedule, sign on the dotted line. So, and my heart was always, even when I was doing sales, my heart was always in on air. Like, that's, you know, again, what I wanted to do since I was a kid. So was able to kind of negotiate into a full-time situation now where, you know, full-time I'm working on content for the stations on air on Mix 95.1, which is our like hot adult contemporary station. And then doing afternoons on live, which we launched that in fall of 2018. And whenever we launched it, it was, you know, it still is me and our content director, Mike Shriver. We basically work together on the station as a tag team operation every day. He schedules the music, programs everything. And then I handle, you know, a majority of like the, you know, on air side of things, you know, developing the promos, writing the imaging and, you know, the content videos and all that kind of stuff. So, and it's just the two of us, you know, I'm the only, you know, on-air voice on the station right now, and you know, it's cool because again, you know, you ultimately have that fun responsibility of, you know, how can you take this brand and use it to help the community. You know, I jokingly tell people all the time, I think of radio now in the same way that I think of like ministry and like churches and things like that. You know, you grow a congregation, you got people that are coming in and they're there and all that kind of stuff. But if you're just like preaching to them, if you're just, you know, talking to them, eventually, you know, some of them will slowly, you know, disappear or go away or pass on or whatever. And then if you're not doing that outreach stuff, like if you're not going out and, you know, handing out, you know, the, you know, food or handing out whatever, like as a church or a ministry, you know, you're not bringing in more people. So, you know, I thought of it the same way when we launched this brand of like, hey, let's go out and like, you know, and do stuff in the community. Let's go to some of the events in Hagerstown and, you know, let's actually make this a station for Hagerstown. If we're going to use promos that are like the station for Hagerstown, then we should, you know, actually stand by that, you know, because like my thing I tell people call BS very, very easily nowadays, especially like we have a younger demo. They call BS on a lot of stuff. And so, you know, for us to then be like, hey, we're for you, Hagerstown, and then they never see us anywhere, like that stinks. So, you know, we did that a lot. And, you know, and really ultimately with that, the rest is history. Like we've been doing that since we launched in late 2018. And, you know, we're loving every minute of it. But yeah, I definitely started when I was 8 years old, wanting to be the next Ryan Seacrest. And ultimately that's kind of remained the same where, you know, eventually I would love to be able to kind of expand this into, you know, a larger kind of situation to where, you know, I'm doing stuff on the air, stuff on camera, you know, hosting, you know, TV shows or different things like that. And, you know, just seeing where that takes me. Cause again, like, you know, I say hosting TV shows, but who knows down the road, you know, what that looks like. So I'm just kind of, you know, just loving, you know, the journey of where media is kind of evolving right now and just kind of, you know, just seeing, you know, where I can, you know, be a part of that in some way, shape or form. So, you know, whether that be in the Ryan Seacrest kind of journey or, you know, the Ryan Smetzer journey, that kind of thing.
Or the
Your own
next
journey.
Elvis Duran.
There you go. Yeah. Bobby Bones. I gotta say, I was personally so stoked whenever that was the one time I had put like every bit of energy into watching Dancing with the Stars, whenever he was on that show and ultimately won. So
I like that.
Hard work pays off.
There you go.
It does. Did you even imagine you'd be in this industry? Like when you were a kid, did you even like imagine?
It was a dream job, like the same way that, you know, a lot of people grow up as kids and they're like, I want to be an astronaut or I want to be a football player or a firefighter or all that kind of stuff. Like that was always my thing. Like, obviously when I was like 4, I wanted to be a spaceman, but like, you know, you lose that after a while. So, you know, broadcasting was what I wanted to do since I was a kid. But it also still stayed in my head as a dream job that like, hey, I'm going to work my butt off and try to do it. If it doesn't happen, then, you know, it wasn't, you know, God's will. But at the same time, I was in that spot where I'm like, you know what, I'm going to take a crack at it and see what happens. And, you know, for a while in high school, I'd create my own little demos and send them out to stations in the area and all that kind of stuff. And finally, at one point when I was at HCC at my community college for the first 2 years of college, there was just that position for that 10 to 2 Saturday gig that my dad said. He was like, hey, I heard a commercial that they were looking for somebody. You should send in your demo. And I'm like, I've done that before. I've never heard anything back. Like, I don't know, whatever. I'll try it. I'll shoot something over. And hilariously enough, I had gotten a call from, you know, the guy who's our afternoon personality, Artie Schultz there at Mix. And he called me on the day that I had just gotten done getting a root canal. So he hears, you know, on it. Yeah, he hears on a demo like, hey, this is Ryan Smetzer and welcome to radio. And then he calls me and I'm like, how are you? I'm like, I'm numb. And my, like, you know, my mouth is so sore. I've got like gauze flying out of my lips. Like it's the grossest thing in the world.
You probably think you're drunk or something.
Right. And I had to preface it. I was like, by the way, sir, like I just got a root canal done. So I apologize if I don't sound like what I did on the track, but I promise you I'm not a liar. So, but it was a fun way to kick off that relationship that I have with him is just like, you know, hey, I can't really talk right now because I've got like everything just shoved down my mouth. So that was thoroughly entertaining. I was also calling a baseball game that afternoon, which was 10 times worse than the phone call where I was like, not batting as if like I've got dentures. So it was a whole thing, but it was definitely a cool call to get because I was like, oh, okay, somebody's actually going to take a chance on this whole thing. So, but yeah, that was I definitely, when I was a kid, I had it like as like a thing of, hey, this would be really cool if I get the chance to do it because it's a dream job. But you know, I never had like doubts necessarily, but I was always in that spot where I was like, hey, I'm content if this isn't what turns out to be the case, but I'm going to try. I'm going to do my best and see what happens.
That's good. I like that. And then what do you like about getting to be a radio DJ?
Yeah. Ooh, so many different things. Honestly, I would say that obviously being able to make content and, do things that are fun every day. But I tell people all the time between doing this stuff and doing like the wedding DJing, from Monday to Sunday, I really have the opportunity to throw a party, whether it be obviously now in, my home studio each day doing my radio shows and stuff like that. Like I pretend like I've got just a whole slew of friends all here in the room and we're all just hanging out, because then when somebody's driving around, if they hear it that way, then that's the vibe they're going to get. And then obviously whenever I'm, doing weddings and stuff, it's the same exact thing. But I'd say the ultimate, like number one thing that I love, and it's, it always sounds cliche when you hear it, but like the people, honestly, like, that was one of the biggest challenges whenever COVID hit was, we weren't around a lot of people doing remotes and events and community opportunities. And we've got this big parade every year here in Hagerstown called the Mummers Parade that happens on like Thanksgiving night. And, there's thousands of people that line the streets. And, one of my favorite memories is, driving the station vehicle and me sitting there in the back hatch, waving to people and, and taking selfies with people there along the parade route and stuff. And, that was so cool. And it's not even like I get like a high out of, having people be like, Ryan, good to see you. It's more so just like, I get to see some cool people. Like I've made some really awesome personal friends and connections and relationships over the years because of, being able to connect with people in the community via the station. So that's, honestly, like the beauty of it too, is I grew up in this area, I born and raised in Washington County, Maryland, which is where we have both of our stations. And, so to be able to kind of grow up and listen to the stuff that I am now on the air for is kind of one of those cool kind of full circle moments, not only just for like my career overall, but to kind of start my career. I've, starting this in 2015, now being in, 5 or 6 years of starting my career in the place that I have called home since I was, 13-pound baby coming out of the womb. That was like one of the coolest parts about it, I think, is just being able to like have a radio career, but also have a radio career that the journey I can always say and tell my kids and grandkids that I started it where I grew up listening to the stations on the bus ride. Or the funny thing is like this brand was the one that I grew up on that I got yelled at by my parents. Hey, stop listening to that music. Like, you know, because it sometimes was inappropriate at 5-6 years old to have on in my room. But, you know, that's just the cool memory of the whole thing, is just being able to kind of start my career in the place that I've just kind of grown up on, and you know, being able to connect with people that I haven't talked to since elementary and middle school, or connect with people that I haven't talked to, you know, over the years, and just reconnecting and connecting with some people over the years.
That's awesome.
I think Radio Disney was my first station I remember listening to as a kid.
That was a good one. That is a really good one. Yeah. Like my mom had always had Mix 95.1 on, like whenever we would drive around going, you know, running errands and all that kind of stuff. And there's a morning show on Mix called the Rick and Lisa Morning Show that they've actually been on for 41 years now.
Wow.
On the same station, which is kind of unheard of in the industry, especially for, you know, an AC station. A lot of times they're flipping through morning shows like it's the phone book. So for them to be
or can't find one.
Right. Yeah, exactly. So, you know, for me to be able to kind of work with them now is really funny, because it's like, you know, those were the two that I was, you know, riding the school bus and listening to as the, you know, family friendly morning show of Rick and Lisa. Like that was kind of the cool thing that I was like, I get people all the time. They're like, so Rick and Lisa, like, you know, I same thing. They always say all the time, I listened to them when I was riding on the bus or when my mom was driving me to school. You hear it from a lot of people. So they're like, what do they like? I'm like, they're great. Like they're so much fun to be around and to communicate with. So it's just, it's funny to kind of hear those kinds of things. But yeah, that was Radio Disney was one that I listened to as well as a kid. And honestly too, like the newer kind of, you know, reincarnation of that station now, which is like, I think like Disney Hits or something like that. Like I still listen to that stuff because, you know, I've got like that guilty pleasure for me is like songs from Disney Channel original movies. So that's always been like a thing. Like I grew up on that stuff, like your High School Musicals and Camp Rocks and all that kind of stuff, Jonas Brothers, like, so I every now and again, I'll just flip over to that stuff.
And Nick Radio as well.
There you go.
That one was a good one. And listening to Maxwell on there when he was like on Nick Radio, that was awesome. Listening to him, he was good. Yeah.
They got TikTok radio too.
Yes. Yeah. I've been listening to that every so often. Like I'll flip through on Sirius XM and I'm like, okay, this is kind of neat because, you know, with TikTok, you only hear obviously bits and pieces. So to kind of get the full context of a song that like has become a TikTok dance or something like that is kind of a genius move, obviously. Because again, like, you know, you hear that stuff all the time whenever you're swiping through nonstop, and to kind of hear the full versions is pretty neat for sure.
Yeah. And then what is it like getting to do two shows on two different stations?
Yeah, it's an interesting beast for sure, because obviously, you know, Live 96.7, we're a top 40 station with kind of a rhythmic lean, meaning, you know, we have top 40 songs that are playing. You've got your mainstream top 40 tracks, but then you also have like, you know, your Cardi B, your Megan Thee Stallion, Beyonce, Drake, you know, you've got those artists. And so, you know, it's cool to kind of have that blend, but also it's pretty different to then, you know, mix where it is, you know, the soundtrack for moms driving their kids to soccer practice or to school, or again, like I mentioned, like riding the school bus. So the music is more family friendly. It's more adult contemporary, you know, it's two separate demographics, obviously, you know, that we're targeting, but it's fun. Because again, especially when I'm, you know, on the air, like I'll do 2 to 6 on here, and I'm talking about, you know, latest trending stories, fun stuff that's going on, you know, things that are happening in Hagerstown. And then I'll jump on Mix, and it's similar, but it's a little bit more of like, you know, the more calmed down kind of trending stories, the fun stuff still, but stuff that, you know, that obviously like if you're driving around, you're not like, oh crap, I need to change the station real quick, that kind of thing. And my favorite part about Mix, especially around November and December, is I will go from top 40 to Christmas music for 2 months, which is my favorite genre of music. Every Thursday, for the most part, I always call my Christmas Thursdays, where I'll be driving around running errands and listening to Christmas music, because it's just like, it's fun and positive. Like I was all in on the whole thing during, what was it, like the first 2 months of COVID, when everybody was watching Christmas movies and Hallmark and listening to Christmas music. I'm like, I've been doing that all year for years now. So whenever we kick into Christmas music, for sure, I'm always in that boat where I'm like, I love this. This is my favorite. And people have always texted me. They're like, I can tell that you were just like on cloud 9 when we're playing, when you're hearing like Christmas music there. So unless it's Christmas shoes, that's super sad. Like when you kick into that song, you're like, you hear it. I'm like, crud. Like you guys had talked to Kira a couple of months ago. I introduced that song to her for the first time a couple of days ago, and she was like, this is so sad. I'm like, I know. For some reason we still play that nationally on Christmas music time on radio, so it's a whole thing. But no, I do love the opportunity of getting to do, two very, some similarities to it. Obviously they're both, involving pop music in some way, shape, or form, but it's still kind of a different branding, a different demo, and it ultimately allows for a little bit more of an adventure too, because you're going from from one monster to the other.
Yeah, I like that. No. What do you like about getting to talk and interact with the listeners?
Yeah, honestly, like it's so many different personalities, I would say, is what I love about it. Like, you've got your people that will talk to you about, the stuff that we're doing on the podcast, which is like our video segment that we do with the Humane Society, where we've got adoptable pets and stuff. So, I'll be talking to some people about cats at one point, and then, maybe I'll do like a trending topic where I'm like, hey, tweet me at Live 96.7 and let me know what your thoughts are on this, and this, and being able to kind of engage with them on that stuff. But, the coolest part too is just like that in-person conversation. Like I had run into somebody who was working at Big Lots a couple of weeks ago when I was buying this stand-up desk, actually, and they had asked for, the phone number for the loyalty discount thing. And they were like, Ryan Smetzer, you're on, 96.7. And, it turned out that it was actually somebody that I had met and connected with at one of the parades in years past. And so we were able to have conversation about like her and her fiance and all of these things. Like, there's obviously like the first step of meeting people in that, you meet because of working in radio, and you're having that interaction with them initially, but then getting to actually know them personally is even cooler, because then you're able to run into them and be like, hey, how's your family? How's this, situation you got going on? That kind of thing. Again, making that comparison to ministry, like being able to interact with that person, but also just genuinely actually care about what they've got going on. So running into people in person is super dope. Messaging with people online is great. It's really just, it's cool to be able to kind of interact with them for sure. And just kind of, get to know all sorts of different walks of life. We're a very diverse area here. And so, again, also too, just, what we talked about even before the interview, like, being able to talk to people from all over the country that are either in the industry or that are listeners. The one thing I was told, a couple of years ago by one of my colleagues on the corporate level at Alpha was, hey, instead of just looking at your numbers of like who's listening in Hagerstown or who's listening in Maryland, zoom out on some of those like streaming statistics and web statistics sometimes, and look at some of the other areas where you actually have some relevance as a brand. And that's what's been super cool, is being able to interact with some of those people, even if you don't even know their name, looking at that statistic and being like, oh, we've got like 7 or 8 stations in, or 7 or 8 people that are listening daily in Georgia or in Arizona or Florida or wherever, just throwing out those states. Like you see that and you're like, okay, cool. Well, you know what? Like, I'm going to give a shout out to that area on air. Like if I can see, on our statistics that, okay, somebody in, Orlando or Jacksonville is listening to 96.7 one day, I can go on there and be like, hey, like, we always talk about the hub city too, but like, got to show some love to the person that's listening in Jacksonville. That's so cool. What's life like? Maybe they'll reach back out, but most of the time it's just cool to be able to kind of, extend that high five to the people that are, listening in other parts outside of your demo. Cause yes, obviously, like, they don't necessarily contribute to the ratings, and they don't, they're not the ones that are going to lead to ad buys and all that kind of stuff and the revenue and blah, 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 blah. But like, again, you're just making those connections. That's
like any listener is a listener.
Right. Yeah. 100%.
Even your dog is a listener.
Exactly. Yeah. I count my cats as listeners. Yeah. I've got 2 cats. And so like, I'll just go on and be like, hey, you know what? Like, if I'm just hanging with my cats right now, that's cool. They're, they can't talk, so they can't criticize me.
Exactly.
That's good.
Yeah.
Like that. And then what is it like getting to work with your coworkers?
Oh, it's amazing. Obviously, because of working from home, I'm not around them in person as much. But what's the saying that absence makes the heart grow fonder? There's so many moments where like I've gone there to be in person, they're in the building, and it's like the coolest family reunion. Obviously, we keep up virtually, we text nonstop and all that kind of stuff.
Good.
But anytime I get to see them in person now, it's even more exciting and even more worthwhile because those connections and things that you're nurturing over time on this thing, whenever you bump into them, in real life or have meetings with them and stuff like that, it's even more special. They're all super nice. The one thing that I love most about, kind of our cluster and our brands in particular in this area are, it's the humility that is kind of associated with a lot of our, coworkers and colleagues is, in a time or in a world where a lot of people are like, man, radio, the industry is just full of egos, and I agree. I've met some people down the road that I'm like, whoo, yep. Y'all, check your heart, y'all. But there's a lot of people that I've also met that I'm like, man, like it's so great and enlightening to know that, there's people that are doing it for all of the right reasons and not to get a status, because at the end of the day, like you don't have to do this to get a celebrity status or get a check mark or to get a big amount of followers. Like if you're trying to achieve that, it's pretty darn easy to do it with this TikTok account and a really good sense of humor or really good dance skills. Like, but if you're going to use this, you're going to use this platform, use it for, really good reasons and connect with others. And I think that, a lot of my coworkers really, attach themselves to that. And I think that's what, really makes it a good, I hate to use this word because I know it's, it's tough to use sometimes in the radio industry, but there's family vibes for sure attached to that. I definitely use that very cautiously at times whenever especially when I post to socials about like, coworkers or people that I, work with in the industry and all that kind of stuff. It's, you have to be very cautious when you're like, it's a family, because there are some people that use that way too loosely. And then, if they get, ultimately screwed over in work or they're laid off or, all that kind of stuff, then they're like, whoa, wait, some family, that kind of thing. So, but, I use it in the way that like, hey, look, like, we treat each other like family. Sometimes we bicker with each other like family, and there's arguments and disagreements, especially in the fact that like I'm 26 years old. I've got colleagues that have been in the industry for that amount of time or double that amount of time, honestly. But, we try to see the positives in that, the fact that like, okay, we've got some people that have been in the industry for 45 to 50 years. Well, let's take all of the knowledge of what they've learned over the last 50 years and use that to help accelerate us into the future, instead of being like, hey, this is how the industry has been working out in the last 45 to 50 years. Let's just stay there versus moving forward, and I think that we've all kind of been able to come to terms with like, hey, let's use that knowledge of the experienced and help me, who, 5-6 years into the industry is still, gaining experience, still learning. And I hope to just continue to learn until I, retire or, if I'm ever able to retire, because my generation, I feel like we're just gonna want to work until we're just gone. But but just using it again to kind of motivate and accelerate into whatever this medium looks like 20, 30, 40 years down the road. So that way then that generation, my generation 40 years down the road, can then go to the next generation and be like, hey, this is how we did this whole radio thing, or this is how we did this whole media thing, and now take that and make it your own thing and run with it. And I think that's what I've loved about, the people that I've gotten the opportunity to work with in the last couple of years.
That's good. I like that. That's awesome. Then what is it like getting to work for Alpha Media? What is that like, and how is that?
Yeah, it's awesome. Honestly, like the culture of the company over the last couple of years, it's great to kind of see a company that, even though they've had the same challenges that a lot of competing companies have, had to deal with, whether it's, financial things or any of that kind of stuff. But like the culture has really kind of remained very much of that live and local kind of thing that a lot of people throw out there. They care about the trickle down of the hierarchy of employees. Like it's not a situation to where, okay, like this cluster has this amount of people. We need to look at, how we're going to save money and trim fat and all that good stuff. They do, I have seen examples, at least personally, where they have invested in individuals as the individual. Like, hey, this is a personality that truly cares and invests time into our product. Let's invest time in them. You know, I've had the great opportunity to work with folks like Phil Becker, who works in our, you know, content division out of Portland, Oregon. And, you know, I always joke about like how cool it is that, like, you know, he's got those connections with like Ed Sheeran and all these guys in the industry. And, you know, so to be able to kind of chat it up with him sometimes and just get inspiration and learn from him is even cooler too, beyond like, you know, getting to learn from my own colleagues locally, you know, getting to kind of, you know, have some great conversations with people on the corporate level about, hey, where do you see this part of the industry going? Or what do you think about this thing that's happening in the industry overall with a zoomed out perspective? You know, it's just cool to get those different perspectives. But I think overall, just like I said, the culture, I think I've really enjoyed, you know, thus far in the last couple of years of just like, you know, in a time where, you know, radio is, you know, radio's always been challenged over several generations. Like, I mean, obviously you look at the 80s with MTV, they were like, oh, radio's gone. Or when the internet started up, there goes radio. And, you know, and now you see there's like, oh, well, social media, oh, TikTok, oh, streaming, radio's gone. Well, no, like the reason why radio survived after all those generations is because of the pioneers of that particular time that have said, okay, well, you're saying that radio, you know, video is going to kill the radio star. How about let's take radio and evolve it to work with video. Let's take radio and make it work with social media. Let's, you know, let's make it to where, you know, people aren't saying, you know, what's the awkward thing where people have gone up to like, you know, people in the industry and been like, hey, great to meet you. Oh yeah, you're on that station. That's cool. Yeah, no, I never listened to radio, but like, it's really cool that you do what you do. And I'm like, no one's ever gone up to like a nurse and been like, man, it's really amazing. You're a healthcare hero. Like, you know, I don't really go to the doctor and I just, you know, it's just not really my thing, but like, you know, good for you. Or, you know, oh really? Like, you know, you're the governor of my state. Oh, sick. Great to meet you. I'm really just not a fan of my state, but like, that's good for you. Like, cool that you have that job. Like, so it's, you know, it avoids that stigma of like, oh, like, yeah, you know, I don't even know who's tuning into radio at this point. I'm going to flip over to Spotify. Okay. Yeah. I listen to Spotify too. I listen to podcasts. Like, I'm not going to be that annoying, naive person that's like, oh yeah, all I listen to is terrestrial radio. I flip it in my car. There's nothing else. I refuse to connect to Bluetooth. No, but you know, it's finding that mix and inspiring people to mix up their content a little bit. And okay. Yeah. Like, I'm going to listen to Spotify. I'm going to listen to podcasts and streams and all of those different things, but I'm also going to dig into radio at the same time and listen to what Ryan's got to say, or listen to, you know, what these personalities have to say. And I think that, you know, Alpha's really helped me in my growth as a personality to do exactly that, to not be like, hey, listen to this station and nothing else, but being like, hey, listen to this station, then go check us out on Instagram, but also go, you know, do whatever you want to do. Like, you know, we're not forcing you to do anything. Your life. Yeah, exactly. You've got all the freedom in the world to go listen to whatever you want to listen to. But, you know, instead having that gratitude of like, thank you for listening to this content. Thank you for watching this video online. You know, we're thankful for you, you know, glad that you're sticking around. You know, thanks for being you. That kind of thing. And so the Alpha's really, you know, helped ultimately a lot with that, and just providing those resources. You know, a lot of this stuff obviously here in the home studio is, you know, out of pocket. It's stuff that I've, you know, purchased myself, but they've been able to then provide those, you know, the hypothetical resources and the educational resources and the, you know, the mentorship that I've gotten from some of those individuals, and, you know, on the corporate level has, you know, really helped kind of, you know, grow me into where I am now, but also help me kind of plunge, you know, headfirst into whatever the industry has in mind for me down the road. So I think that's been the beauty of it for sure.
That's good. Then, do you recommend going to college to be a radio DJ?
Yeah, I'm always in between on that. Like I tell people all the time, you know, getting a degree in communications is definitely an awesome opportunity. You know, it's also not something that you absolutely have to do anymore because of, you know, because of the internet. Like, you know, you can ultimately become a personality in electronic media before even high school. You know, at this point, I remember being in the 7th grade and getting a Ustream account, which I don't even think that website exists anymore, but it was basically like Twitch way back when in like 2008 or 9. And I tried to, you know, rig up like my dad's old camcorder into a USB converter and try to stream myself. And it was a tragic failure, but it was me learning how to use that kind of technology. And ultimately it's helped where, you know, nowadays that's just the name of the game. That's what you do. But it's one of those things where I tell people all the time, like, if you're going to go into college for a broadcast medium or electronic media, get an opportunity, use it as an opportunity to learn every facet of media, whether it's radio, whether it's television, whether it's public relations, whether it's, writing for print, which is ultimately, doing a lot of, writing for online media. All of those different things really help come into play to where then if you decide to come out of college and work in radio, you're going to need all of that. I went to Shippensburg for electronic media and communication journalism, but electronic media was the track that I went on. And so, I spent, a semester or two on radio stuff, which I was already kind of working part-time in radio too. So I was kind of getting the, both worlds there, and I spent some time, working on TV producing. And there was, opportunity that came around out of college where I could have gone into that if I wanted to, but news scares me sometimes where I'm like, I always joke with people all the time. Like whenever I do stuff on camera, I have the habit of smiling just because that's just any stuff that I've ever done from a video content perspective is usually happy. So for me then to be like, good evening, everybody. There was a crazy robbery and somebody almost got shot and it was a crazy time. Here's the weather. Like, it's just like, obviously it's not a smiley thing to do, but, getting that experience in television helped me learn more about video and editing and writing for news and leadership really all together at the same time. And, I've been able to use that. Like, I do online hosting and producing for the live stream for my church in West Virginia. And, so it's helped with that. Public relations is major because a lot of times when you're working in radio, you're also marketing the station, you're running the socials, and to have a marketing mindset is even better. That was a huge thing. And then obviously like writing for print, you're going to be blogging a lot. You're going to be tweeting a lot. You're going to be doing a lot of writing. And so if you go into radio, you're going to need that, knowledge as well. So being able to get a degree where you can kind of learn so many pieces of the broadcasting bucket and then pour it all into radio if you want to, or pour it onto TV, PR, whatever you want to do. It helps then too, because if you decide down the road, you're like, hey, my heart's just not in the whole radio thing anymore. I still want to do some of it, but I also then want to dive into being a public relations director or a marketing manager. I've got amazing friends that, I went to college with that started in radio. They did their thing. They got to a point where they're like, yeah, you know what? I'm going to step away for a little while, just, dabble with some other things. And they're now, lead marketing directors for major corporations and major companies. And, it's again, like, but radio still follows you along the way. I talk to him all the time and he talks about how, radio, like all of the pieces and things that I learned when I did radio are now part of my marketing job. So, I kind of spiraled around the answer to the question, but I would say, if you're gonna go into college for radio, specifically try to also make sure that you're getting kind of the knowledge from every facet of broadcast media and really any kind of media, so that when you get out of college you can do radio, but you also have knowledge about everything else, and that's ultimately going to help evolve whatever medium you're going into. If you go into radio, you got the knowledge of all that other stuff, you can help just skyrocket your industry into wherever you're going. But at the same time, if you don't go to college for radio, or if you don't go to college for broadcast media, it's not like, there are still some companies that do require it. Like they do say on there, like, must have a bachelor's degree or better, or all of those different things. But a lot of times too, like, you can do your own thing going into high school. You can do your own thing going into college or going into college age and start working or doing your own stuff online and making money off of that too. It's so easy to create your own brand and thrive with your own brand without that piece of paper in a frame at the end of the day. But, if you have the capability, the financial ability to be able to go to college and learn those things, 100% by all means, I would never, I would always go back and do it again if I had the opportunity to, to go back and get a degree again at Shippensburg. And, I loved my time there. The people that I got to meet, the connections that I got to make, made it 100% worth every penny. But again, like I said, we've also evolved in a time where it's like, hey, if you can do your own thing, do your own thing and we'll celebrate it.
That's good. Like that.
Yeah, that's great.
And then before Jordan asks you the other questions and takes over for the last ones, do you think connection is important to get into this industry?
100,000 bajillion trillion cajillion percent. You know, the one thing that I have loved so far, even in 2022, where, you know, math 54 days into the year, you know, has been the connections that I've made even just in this year alone. You know, I really made it kind of one of my goals for the new year was jumping in and making some more connections and more meaningful connections with the right mindset, you know, going into it, was, you know, meeting people within the industry, meeting people that are not just like, I think when people take, I want to make connections in radio, or I want to make connections in broadcast, it's like they immediately go to like the first like GM or the first program director they can find, when it's like, well, no, you don't really have to do that. Like start making friends with a lot of these people, because when they know that like you're making those connections to be able to help foster them, help grow them, help them, and just support them, you know, when somebody comes to them and says, hey, what do you think about that Ryan Smetzer person? Or what do you think about whoever? You know, they're going to give a glowing endorsement because they know that that they care about you, or you care about them. And so, you know, connections are very, very important, but you know, connections with the right intentions, I think, are what really make a, not only a good person, but make a great career. Like you're able to grow in whatever job or whatever career path you go in, if you're making really good positive connections, and you're able to kind of, you know, build that and thrive off of that, for sure. But I think a lot of people make connections and then they don't even realize that they're taking advantage of those connections until it's too late. So going into it with the intention of like, hey, I want to connect with this person just because I think they're freaking cool. Like just because I think that they're incredibly talented. Like, you know, that's really kind of where like doing the free for all stuff over the last couple of weeks kind of came into play. I saw that on Twitch. I was watching it on, you know, all over social media, and I just jump into the chat, and next thing you know, I'm, you know, connecting with Sean, and now, you know, then fast forward, and, you know, I got to meet Kira and Dana up in Allentown and hang out with them. And, you know, we're already making plans for next month. And it's like, you know, it's, you know, cause they're only like a 2-ish hour drive up the road from me. So, you know, it's just been cool to make those connections, meet those cool people. But at the end of the day, like if I'm making those connections without any idea or motive in mind, like I'm just making them because I think they're great people and I want to, you know, become friends with them. You know, and that's kind of the most important thing, you know, is making connections with really good intentions in mind, and not just thinking of, especially in the radio industry, like just not thinking of the broadcast and radio industry as like LinkedIn, where it's like, hey, I'm just going to fire off some messages to 30 people that I see that are in the industry. If they answer, great. If they don't, whatever. Just nurturing those connections along the way and making them actual like relationships, I think are really, really vastly important. Because then at the end of the day, like if you grow and have an incredible, like, you know, growth in your career, and you're up at the top of their peak, and you're thinking, man, this is great, then great, awesome. But if you made those connections and you haven't done that, at least you made some really awesome friends along the way, and you've met some people that care truly about you and celebrate you as well. So yeah, connections are super important in on both sides of the pendulum, whether it means, you know, growing your career, but also just making just great friends in the industry. And it helps when you hear all of the stigma of like, you know, egos are everything in radio, and everybody's full of themselves and conceited and blah blah blah. I've met so many people in the last year that I'm like, I don't know about that anymore. Like, yeah, I know a lot of people that I know a lot of people that have massive heads in the industry, and you know, you definitely see those people, but you learn to block them out. Not block them like online, but like blocking them out and realizing that, well, hey, yeah, that too, for sure. You know, but getting into that mode where you're like, hey, you know what? Like, yeah, that person has a severe ego, but I'm not going to let that bother me. Because if you get too caught up in like, oh, this person's full of themselves, or this person thinks that they are God's gift to broadcasting, you know, if you get too heavily involved in that, it's going to consume you too. So it's more so of just like seeing that, being like, yeah, they're full of themselves, but I'm not going to let that keep me from looking ahead and just speeding to, you know, whatever I'm getting to in my career.
Yeah, I like that. Okay, now it is Jordan.
My turn
to take over and do the last few questions. So yeah, okay.
Well, I would start off with this question because I think it'd be a really good question to ask, since our podcast audience is probably the most people that would want to be in radio one day. And so for those who want to be in radio industry, what position do you recommend that they start off with?
Ooh, that is a really good question. I would say really, digging into whatever is available. I think we hear a lot of stories and journeys of some of the bigger personalities like, Bobby Bones and some of those guys that, they genuinely started out just kind of saying, hey, I want to work for you. I don't care what it is. I'll scrub the floors. I'll do X, Y, and Z. Whatever you need me to do, I got you covered, and it's cool. Cause that's also like, that's just such a good servant's mindset of just like, hey, I'm gonna, put this work in. But I also think that like some people get so heavily into that where they're like, you know what? Yeah, I'm gonna just, become a slave to the industry until I can, get the really good job and all that kind of stuff. I would say just like, going for whatever you see that's available, if it's like there's like a part-time promotions position available or, a part-time gig, but also remembering your value even at the very beginning of the journey, knowing, your own talents, knowing your own self-worth and making sure that it's not like, I'm going to take this job because I'm starting out, and then, immediately then like 2 weeks later being like, all right, I'm definitely being taken advantage of. But I would say like, seeking out any like internship opportunity, especially if you're in college or even in high school. There's a lot of opportunities, even whenever you're in high school. I know, some of my coworkers started in radio when they were 15 and have been in the same companies since then, which is remarkable. So exactly. Like there is opportunity to start really whenever you want to start. So I would say just, taking those opportunities, interning, doing what you guys are thriving off of, which is doing internet radio, doing streaming, honestly, like I tell people all the time, like it is so easy to start a podcast nowadays. Like you don't even need to be on like the platforms in order to start a podcast. Like you can do it on Twitch, you can do it on Twitter Spaces, you can do it on, there was the Clubhouse there for a while. Like there's so many opportunities to create an audio presence, and then you've got a portfolio right there. Bam. Like all you got to do is then take that, make it, clean and crisp, make it into a demo and start sending it to stations. And, I always tell people you don't have to start out like minuscule in order to feel like, okay, like I'm starting my journey in radio. Go nuts, start creating your own content online, go for it, freestyle, and then, then kind of hone it in and be like, hey, I'm going to use this content now that I have it and this following or, this community of people that I'm involved with now and try to turn it into something cool in a career. And so there's so many opportunities that way. But, I would say like, if you've got an opportunity to go part-time in an on-air position, my goodness, go crazy. If you got an opportunity to go full-time, even better, but there's also just so many cool parts of the radio like bucket that like, you can do like promotions and traffic, setting commercials, selling, getting in sales is a great way to tap into the industry, even if you, want to eventually just do on air. I did some part-time on air work before I did that, but that's kind of part of my journey too. Like, I did that time in sales full-time so that I could eventually develop into going full-time on air and in content, but also just doing what you can do using the platforms and kind of free opportunities that are out there. But also just, seeking out whatever you can seek out and, also finding mentorship, whether it be through other people in the industry nationwide, whether it be through, radio academies or camps and things like that, but just, finding those kinds of resources, connecting with them, and just finding ways to use that to kind of, help grow yourself. But also, then whenever you're, at a spot where you've grown and you're continuing to grow, find opportunities to then help grow that next generation and go on and on and on. It's like when you're paying for the Starbucks for the person behind you and they keep the chain going, like do that, like, to help people really tap into, into starting their careers. But that's what I would say is just kind of seek out whatever you can find that is, worthwhile, that's going to help you and that's going to help you grow and get you to a spot where that like, okay, I'm on the right path. I'm in a good spot.
Just don't overwork yourself.
Yes. Oh, 100%. Yeah. I mean, rest. I learned that the hard way some years where I would just like, I'm like, the grind don't stop 24/7, 365. Let's go crazy. And there are times that I still have to like, really kind of stop myself and be like, hey, it's time to rest. It's time to, take a step back, lay down, pet my cats, go to sleep, not go too nuts because again, you don't want to burn yourself out ever. Burnout sucks.
There's a time where I did mine for like 5 years straight. No breaks.
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, I need to take a break now.
Right.
Like,
Yeah. Cause it's like, you ultimately want to overflow into others however you
Mhm.
can. And if you are trying to overflow and fill into other people, your
Mhm.
bucket's eventually going to be completely empty and
Yeah.
Yeah.
you aren't able to do that. And so you have to help yourself be filled as well, whether that be, seeking out great connections and friendships, whether that be ultimately resting,
Mhm.
vacationing, all of that kind of stuff. That's one thing I'm
Yeah.
thankful for. And, my cluster that I work under, that my GM is so great when it comes to that, where I'm like, hey,
Hmm.
I gotta go take a mental health day, or I gotta take like 2 or
Mhm.
3 days and go disappear for a little bit, and ultimately it's like, yeah, sure, go right ahead. Some
Yeah.
days I'll just go, I'll take that time off. Some days I'll track ahead, and I'm
Mhm.
still talking to my friends here in the area on the air, but
Mhm.
I'm might be in Ocean City, or I might be
Yeah.
just laying on my couch.
Mhm.
So
Or
rest is
Disneyland.
so important. Or Disney, yes, I did that
Mhm.
about a month ago. I had
Oh
planned on
wow.
just doing that as a beach trip, and then it got really cold in Florida and rainy and gross, and so I said,
Wow.
well, it's rainy and gross, but I can still throw on a poncho and a smile and go hang out with Mickey
Mhm.
Mouse. So I did that for about 2 or 3 days.
Wow. That's good.
Yeah,
The
it
mental
works.
health is important, so that's
Yes.
good. Mhm.
Hmm.
Yes, very important. What do you think the radio industry will be like in 5 to 10 years?
Ooh, yeah,
I think
that's
I think we'll have robots like doing our job.
I mean, I joke all the time that eventually they're going to find a way to just like put all of Ryan Seacrest's shows in a
Mhm.
computer and eventually be
Yeah.
able to just do a show where it's just all of his stuff like regurgitated.
Mhm.
Yeah.
But no, I think that honestly, the way that like a lot of the great, pioneers of this industry are working right
Mhm.
now to kind of, again, help really innovate and kind of evolve the product.
Mhm.
I think it's, first of all, it's still going to exist. I think there's a
Yeah.
lot of people that have very minimal hope with that. And they're like, well, I'm
Mhm.
thinking it's probably just going to die off and podcasts are going to take over. I'm like, podcasts have been a thing for
Yeah.
ages. And yes, they have grown into a very significant amount. And I love them to
Mhm.
death. I respect the podcast industry, and I listen to a ton myself. But I also do think that I'm like, radio's going to be around.
Mhm.
It might be, it might look and sound very different.
Yeah.
It might include a lot of the things that a lot of people are saying are gonna kill radio, like
Mhm.
podcasts and talk
Mhm.
shows and streaming and all of that kind of
Mhm.
stuff. You're seeing it already to where it's like,
Yeah.
I mean, Carla Marie and Anthony have figured it out so well where it's
Mhm.
like their Twitch show is incredible. It's
Yeah, it
remarkable.
is.
It's better than a lot of
Mm.
morning shows that I've listened to growing up. Like it's just
Mhm.
like I see that and I'm like, they've figured it out, like how
Yeah.
to not reinvent the wheel, but how to take the wheel and make it even cooler.
Mhm.
And so I think that really over the next 5 to 10 years, it's going to grow. It's going to evolve into
Mhm.
something that right now we have no clue what it's going to look and sound like. But I
Yeah.
think it's going to be great because the people that truly care about the product and not how the product is going to help themselves
Mhm.
are going to be the ones that are going to really help shape the industry. And I think eventually the people that are doing it for their own selfish goals or their own
Mhm.
growth, like, hey, I want to be the biggest thing since sliced bread, they're going to be the ones that you probably aren't going to see. I think
Yeah.
that it's the people that truly care about using the product to connect with people are going to be the
Mhm.
ones that I think that are going to help make it shape into what it is in the next 5 to 10 years. At least
Mhm.
that's what I keep my fingers crossed and hope and try to do my best to help contribute to that in some way.
Yeah. That's good.
Yeah, I think that'd be cool. Would you think it'd be important to have a following to be in this industry?
Yes, and but I also kind of like take that with a grain of salt. Like
Mhm.
I think a following is definitely important,
Yeah.
but it's how you use the following that's even more
Mhm.
important. I think
Yeah.
that growing a following just for the sake of having a following is what
Yeah.
has caused a lot of mental health
Mhm.
issues when it comes to like people, especially in the
Yeah.
TikTok generation. Like
Yeah.
you see these people that have rose to fame in a matter of 2 days, and then but they're not at all prepared for that. And
Mhm.
then, next thing you know, it's like it's not really being used for great purpose. I think
Yeah.
that a following is great, a platform is great, but it's how you use that following, how you use
Mhm.
that platform that really speaks to who you are.
Yeah.
Because again, just like I mentioned earlier, where like, our listeners here see through the BS. like everyone collectively sees through the BS. If you're on Instagram and you've got thousands upon thousands upon thousands of followers and everybody's watching your content and checking that stuff out, yeah, well, that's a whole other conversation for another day. The bots thing. But if you've got all of this massive following and everybody's fawning after you and all that kind of stuff, eventually that's going to die out. Eventually that's going to lose its excitement and lose its luster. And that 15 minutes of fame or whatever is going to not be as exciting and thrilling as, you know, it might be initially. And so how you leverage that following to grow some sort of positive message to others is what's even more important. You know, that's why, like, you know, I tell people all the time, like, yeah, eventually what I'd love to do is to be able to kind of grow what I'm doing right now here in a small town in Western Maryland, you know, to something that has, you know, a large following, a national following, or be on a larger scale platform, host a TV show on a network or whatever it might look like. But you know, I also want to do that to be able to, you know, make people smile, put smiles on people's faces, you know, change the way that somebody's seeing the world that might be driving, you know, home from work and really just thinking, man, like, what really is my purpose? What am I doing? And, you know, try to find ways, you know, indirectly and sometimes directly to show them that what they're looking for, to make them smile, to make them know that they're known, seen, heard, and that they're cared about and that they're important people. And so that's what I feel like too, like, you know, yeah, following is big. But it's a matter of like how you use that circle that is ultimately important, because we can so much so in society nowadays see through the BS of like, okay, yeah, that person's got a growing following, but they're kind of a jerk.
Yeah.
And like Charlie D'Amelio and the Hulu. So
I haven't gotten to see that yet, but I saw like some bits and pieces, and I think that even it touches on that hardcore that, like, you know, what's the Spider-Man slogan, with great power comes great responsibility, that like if you're handed this kind of thing, it's like, you know, it's like if you never had any intention of running for president, but all of a sudden they hand you the nuclear codes, you're like, what? How do I, what do I do with my hands? You know, it's just like that. Like if you're handed a massive following in an instantaneous amount of time, or if you're growing your following for bad intentions, you're not going to know what to do with it. You're not going to know how to use that. And, you know, yes, there's, you know, obviously the financial side of it's like, yeah, growing a following allows you to, you know, make more money and be able to support a family and do X, Y, and Z. But you got to do it the right way. And I think that's one of the biggest things that I've always kind of, you know, reminded myself of, but reminded, you know, people that are, you know, that are growing in the industry alongside me, or even, you know, people that have been in the industry for decades still need to be reminded that, you know, and I know that I'll need to be reminded that whenever, you know, I'm 40 and 50 and, you know, I'm still trying to do this whole thing. So I think that's kind of the biggest thing to that, you know, it does have importance, but the most important thing beyond that too is, okay, what do you do with that following? What do you do with that blue check mark or whatever?
Yeah, like that.
I got nothing to say about that.
Nice. That's awesome.
What do you love about the radio, like all the radio in general and the radio industry?
Yeah. Radio in general, I think, you know, what I love most obviously is, like, I've always loved music since I was a kid. You know, I've always loved pop music. I've always loved, you know, really a ton of genres. It's why I love getting to do like the DJing of weddings and stuff like that. Is, you know, there'll be one weekend that I'm doing a wedding that it's a ton of country music, and there'll be one wedding where I'm, you know, doing a wedding that's, you know, all EDM. Like, you know, it's just K-pop. Like I can, or K-pop. I mean, like I can vibe to just about anything. And so, you know, getting into the radio industry, I was like, well, this is going to be really cool, because I don't really care what format I'm on. If I'm on a country station, if I'm on a pop station, if I'm on a hip hop station, you know, it's one of those things that it's just like, I don't really care what format I get thrown into. I'm going to just have fun regardless. And I think that's one thing I love about radio, is just like, it doesn't matter what format you're on. If you are, you know, jumping in there, you're having fun, and you are making the other person on the other side of the speaker also have fun and be excited about whatever you're talking about, then, you know, that's all that matters. I think what I love most about the industry, you know, like I said earlier with, like, you know, I love the people, I love where it's going. I love where it's evolving. I love the fact that I honestly, I love the fact that we're all kind of terrified about, like, what is radio going to look like in you know, in whatever amount of time, or, you know, what is the internet going to do to radio? What is podcasting going to do to radio? Are we all going to have jobs? Like, you know, all this kind of stuff. And I'm like, awesome. I love the fact that like, you know, there's kind of this big question mark that hovers over it, because ultimately it's then what you do with that question mark there. You take it and you're like, okay, well, you know what? If radio is evolving, let me be the one that helps evolve it, and let me not be the one that allows it to falter or become a shell of its former self and all of that kind of stuff. It's always, by the way, reinvented itself. So, you know, I think that's what I love the most about the industry is, you know, being able to have that opportunity to make it different or make it cooler, make it attached to whatever is the big thing right now. But also able to work together with like other people in the industry, you know, whether it be people outside of, you know, my company or other people outside of my market, or scary other people that are direct competitors. You know, like I've had people that are, you know, at the station 25-30 minutes down the street that I'm like, hey, let's get lunch, you know? And it's like, and luckily like they're around, you know, my age, or they're, you know, in a good spot where they're humble and they're not like, ooh, well, I don't know about that. Like, you know, what if somebody sees it and blah, blah, blah. I'm like, nobody gives two diddly squats that like, you know, the two people that work for two different radio stations, half the time, a lot of people don't know that there's competition within a lot of radio stations as is. Like I get, you know, questions all the time from people locally that are like, hey, you know, you're on that company with the country station, right? And I'm like, no, but I like them. Because then if you say no, then it's like, oh, I'm sorry, my goodness, like shucks, I didn't know that you didn't work for them. I'm really sorry. I hope I didn't offend you. And I'm like, no, why? Why would that be offensive? You know, so it's just like, you know, just being friends with whoever you encounter with, no matter, you know, what their stance is on a ranking of radio stations in the area, for crying out loud. I always tell people that are like, well, you know, what do you mean? Like, you know, you can't be friends with that. You can't talk to that person. They're, you know, they're ultimately like the enemy of you and blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, yeah, if I ever think that way, smack me until I don't think that way. Like smack me and tell me to go get counseling for that, because that's such an ego problem. But yeah, that's kind of what I love about the industry is definitely not just the, like I mentioned before, the people that we get to interact with in the community, but the people in the actual radio community that we get to have laughs with and communicate with and talk to, that, you know, it doesn't matter what side of the aisle they're on, or what, you know, what company they're in, or, you know, if they're making more money than you and all that kind of stuff, you know, cool. Be friends with them. Maybe, you know, they might, you know, might be blessed with an opportunity to work with them someday. So that's kind of where I'm at on that. Like, you know, it's what I love probably about the industry the most is just, it's one big, cool, like, high school. Yes, there are cliques, there are groups, there are clubs, there's all these different, you know, places you can go to, but at the, you know, at the same exact time, you can make a ton of cool friends no matter where you are.
Would you do like radio stuff like voluntarily?
Yeah, I think so. I think honestly, like, you know, that was something that I ultimately did whenever I was in high school and middle school. You know, from a broadcast perspective, I do that, you know, a lot within my church. You know, we have, you know, our online streams for, you know, for my church every Sunday morning, and you know, I do a lot of hosting there on Sunday mornings where, you know, you get up, you know, 6 o'clock in the morning, and you roll down there, and you know, you get ready, you do your rehearsals, you write all your copy same way you would if you were on a TV station, and it's, you know, it's obviously a, you know, a different concept, a different style, but I've been able to take a lot of what I've learned as a volunteer there and doing broadcast there voluntarily into what I do that I get a paycheck for. You know, it's gotten me out of a lot of habits sometimes when I'm on air and I'm like, it's Mix 95.1, today's best music mix, and you sound like you're 65 years old. You know, it's gotten me way out of that vibe and more into, hey, it's Ryan Smetzer, how you doing today? Like, you know, what's going on? Like having those conversations with the microphone as if it's a human being, and not as if you are, you know, the guy at the intro to Grease who's like, oh, that's fun. No, no one wants to hear that in 2022. So I'd say that, like, yes, you know, voluntarily, that is, you know, it's something that if you have the time and you have the opportunity to do it, and it's not going to, you know, burn you out, like I, you know, talked about before. Yeah, it's not going to affect your schedule. It's not going to affect your well-being. If it can if it can truly, help you grow you and also grow people at the same exact time, sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's one of the things that I've always told people, like, when, especially even when I do like DJing work, like with the weddings and the events and all that kind of stuff, like if I'm not already booked and somebody reaches out and says, hey, there's, a charity run happening at da-da-da place at 8 a.m, can you bring your stuff out and MC it? Yeah, I've got the time. If I do, if I'm not like out late DJing a wedding the night before and I have the opportunity to roll out and do that kind of stuff, absolutely. And I think everybody, should embrace that if they can. But if they can't, that's fine. That's, that's 100% acceptable too. I think, you can't be hard on yourself either about like, okay, hey, like I don't have the schedule or the capability to volunteer or do this charity thing or do this kind of thing. It doesn't make you a bad person. It just makes you unavailable at that moment in time. So yeah, that's how I feel kind of about like volunteering, especially within like the broadcast and radio kind of landscape.
That's cool. So like if me and Jacob we want you to have like we'll do like a morning show for us. Would you consider that?
There you go. Yeah, if I'm available, I think that's, again, like I said, like that's,
Okay.
if I'm free to do it, then sure, yeah, that's that's where I kind of stand, of course, from a general scope too.
All right. Well, we'll keep that in mind, right, Jacob?
Here we go.
Yeah.
For those who want to check out and listen to Live 967 and Mix 951, do you want to share anything about these two stations?
Sure. Yeah. Obviously, online, obviously our website's live967.com, mix95.com, but you can get both stations on Odyssey, on TuneIn, on iHeart, on obviously, Alexa and Google Play, and, you can ask Siri to play those stations as well.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's all those platforms. Obviously too, on certain weeknights, I have the cool opportunity to do free for all. So, that's there on freeforall.show, or, all the content there on their socials. You can access the stream there. And then, any of the other stuff too, like, at Ryan Smetzer is my, handle for almost all of my, social media. So, everybody can connect with me on there. And, I'm always, willing and able to jump in and chat with people too. Like that's the one thing that I love, again, about making those connections with social media. It's not like, hey, follow me on TikTok or hey, follow me on Instagram. And then it's like, okay, cool. I follow you on the social media platform. What next? That's kind of where I always stand on that, is just like, hey, like, use that to nurture those connections and relationships too. So, but yeah, so that's all the ways that they can listen to those stations, is really just anywhere on streaming. There's basically the availability to tune in, and I'm on from 2 to 6 on live, 2 to 6 p.m. Eastern time. I should make sure I throw out the time zone there. And then 6 to 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time there on Mix 95.1. So you can get your hip hop and top 40 fix and your adult contemporary fix there, basically all in one big helping.
Yeah.
Cool. Who in radio would you like to give a shout out to?
Yeah.
Ooh, oh my goodness. I would say, obviously we talked about them earlier, Carla Marie and Anthony. They're, they're just doing so much great work out there. With their Twitch show, kicking off that podcast I've been listening to the last couple of days. And, they always inspire me directly because of just, what they've done to take radio, the concept, and make it streaming, podcasts, merchandise, all of these different things, and still keep up with, the medium that they originated on, but take it and really revolutionize it. And so I think there's somebody that, like, between them and, I've always obviously grew up on, Seacrest and Bobby Bones and all those people and their stories. But what I've loved the last several years is then being able to also connect with, everybody collectively in the industry, no matter what station they're on, no matter what market they're in, and just seeing how they evolve. But I would say those two for sure, the ones that I would, I always try to give them a shout out, and of course, just all my new friends there on Free for All, and Sean and Kira and Dana and the whole crew there too. So, but they're all awesome, and you all should definitely follow them and follow their journeys too, because they all are still, continuing to be on just incredible stories in their careers too.
And the radio fam, of course.
Yeah.
Where can everyone check you out at and follow you?
Yeah. They can check me out at Ryan Smetzer on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, Facebook.com/Smetzer is where I've got most of my content on there. And then of course our station socials are the same, Live 96.7 and Mix 95.1. I usually make sure that everything is all, spread out, that good old social media content mix, so to speak. But yeah, they can follow me on there and interact, and would love to, again, always love to get to meet new people, especially, that are either in the industry or follow the industry heavily too, or are just getting into the industry. Those are even cooler too, being able to just kind of chat with them and just again, watch their journeys as well.
That's good.
Awesome. Well, thanks for joining.
Yeah,
absolutely. Thanks for having me. And again, thank you so much for everything that you guys are doing too. Just getting to, hear the stories of so many cool people, again, in the industry, outside of the industry, and, people that are just changing the game. But ultimately too, like it's such a cool opportunity for, for you guys as well, being able to see y'all's journey and just seeing all the cool stuff that you guys get to do too. So just keep up the awesomeness and just looking forward to seeing what the next chapter holds for you guys too.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Really means a lot.
That.
And then before you head out, before I stop the recording and all that, do you want to share the people who are listening, if they really want to, and if they love the podcast, feel free to leave a review or give us 5 stars.
Absolutely. Yeah. So guys, if you love listening to this podcast each and every time that it is dropping, each and every time you hear a cool interview, and when you get to hear these two awesome dudes, check it out. Again, go rate and review, subscribe on whatever platform that you are listening on, whether it's, on Anchor, on Apple Podcasts, on Spotify. That was the word I was looking for. Head over there, subscribe, comment, leave a review, follow their social media. They're both freaking awesome, and just be able to engage with them and help them, continue to grow this awesome product that they have.